Haganah was a Jewish paramilitary organization in what was then the British Mandate of Palestine from 1920 to 1948, which later became the core of the Israel Defense Forces. History Overview The evolution of Jewish defense organizations in Palestine and later Israel went from small self-defense groups active during Ottoman rule, to ever larger and more sophisticated ones during the British Mandate, leading through the Haganah to the National Army of Israel, the IDF. The evolution went step by step from Bargira, to Hazoma, to Haganah, to IDF. The Jewish paramilitary organizations in the new IDF started with the Second Aliyah. The first such organization was Bargira, founded in September 1907. It consisted of a small group of Jewish immigrants who guarded settlements for an annual fee. At no time did Bargira have more than 100 members. It was converted to Hazoma in April 1909, which operated until the British Mandate of Palestine came into being in 1920. Hazoma was an elitist organization with narrow scope, and was mainly created to protect against criminal gangs seeking to steal property. During World War I, the forerunners of the Haganah IDF were the Zion Mule Corps and the Jewish Legion, both of which were part of the British Army. After the Arab Riots against Jews in April 1920, the IDF's leadership saw the need to create a nationwide underground defense organization, and the Haganah was founded in June of the same year. The Haganah became a full-scale defense force after the 1936–1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine with an organized structure, consisting of three main units: the Field Corps, Guard Corps, and the Palm Strike Force. During World War II, the successor to the Jewish Legion of World War I was the Jewish Brigade, which was joined by many Haganah fighters. During the 1947–48 civil war between the Arab and Jewish communities in what was still mandatory Palestine, a reorganized Haganah managed to defend or wrestle most of the territory it was ordered to hold or capture. At the beginning of the ensuing 1948–49 full-scale conventional war against regular Arab armies, the Haganah was reorganized to become the core of the new Israel Defense Forces. 1920 and 1921 Arab Riots After the 1920 Arab Riots and 1921 Jaffa Riots, the Jewish leadership in Palestine believed that the British, to whom the League of Nations had given a mandate over Palestine in 1920, had no desire to confront local Arab gangs that frequently attack Palestinian Jews. Believing that they could not rely on the British administration for protection from these gangs, the Jewish leadership created the Haganah to protect Jewish farms and kibbutzim. In addition to guarding Jewish communities, the role of the Haganah was to warn the residents of and repel attacks by Palestinian Arabs. In the period between 1920–1929, the Haganah lacked a strong central authority or coordination. Haganah units were very localized and poorly armed. They consisted mainly of Jewish farmers who took turns guarding their farms or their kibbutzim. Following the 1929 Palestine riots, the Haganah's role changed dramatically. It became a much larger organization encompassing nearly all the youth and adults in the Jewish settlements, as well as thousands of members from the cities. It also acquired foreign arms and began to develop workshops to create hand grenades and simple military equipment, transforming from an untrained militia to a capable underground army. 1931 Irgun split Many Haganah fighters objected to the official policy of Havlagah that Jewish political leaders had imposed on the militia. Fighters had been instructed to only defend communities and not initiate counterattacks against Arab gangs or their communities. This policy appeared defeatist to many who believed that the best defense is a good offense. In 1931, the more militant elements of the Haganah splintered off and formed the Irgun Tsva Leumi, better known as Irgun. 1936–1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine During the 1936–1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine, the Haganah worked to protect British interests and to quell Arab rebellion using the FOSH and NHISH units. At that time, the Haganah fielded 10,000 mobilized men along with 40,000 reservists. Although the British administration did not officially recognize the Haganah, the British security forces cooperated with it by forming the Jewish Settlement Police, Jewish Supernumerary Police and Special Night Squads, which were trained and led by Colonel Lord Wingate. The battle experience gained during the training was useful in the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. 1939 White Paper By 1939, the British had issued the White Paper, which severely restricted Jewish immigration to Palestine, deeply angering the Zionist leadership. David Ben-Gurion, then chairman of the Jewish Agency, set the policy for the Zionist relationship with the British: "We shall fight the war against Hitler as if there were no White Paper, and we shall fight the White Paper as if there were no war." In reaction to the White Paper, the Haganah built up the Palmch as the Haganah's elite strike force and organized illegal Jewish immigration to Palestine. Approximately 100,000 Jews were brought to Palestine in over 100 ships during the final decade of what became known as Aliyah Bet. The Haganah also organized demonstrations against British immigration quotas. World War II participation. In 1940 the Haganah sabotaged the Patriot, an ocean liner being used by the British to deport 1,800 Jews to Mauritius, with a bomb intended to cripple the ship. However, the ship sank, killing 260. In the first years of World War II, the British authorities asked Haganah for cooperation again, due to the fear of an Axis breakthrough in North Africa. After Rommel was defeated at El Alamein in 1942, the British stepped back from their all-out support for Haganah. In 1943, after a long series of requests and negotiations, the British Army announced the creation of the Jewish Brigade Group. While Palestinian Jews had been permitted to enlist in the British Army since 1940, this was the first time an exclusively Jewish military unit served in the war under a Jewish flag. The Jewish Brigade Group consisted of 5,000 soldiers and was initially deployed with the 8th Army in North Africa and later in Italy in September 1944. The brigade was disbanded in 1946. All in all, more than 30,000 Palestinian Jews served in the British Army during the war. On May 14, 1941, the Haganah created the Palmch, an elite commando section, in preparation against the possibility of a British withdrawal and Axis invasion of Palestine. Its members, young men and women, received specialist training in guerrilla tactics and sabotage. During 1942 the British gave assistance in the training of Palmch volunteers, but in early 1943 they withdrew their support and attempted to disarm them. The Palmch, then numbering over 1,000, continued as an underground organization with its members working half of each month as kibbutz volunteers, the rest of the month spent training. It was never larger. By 1947 it amounted to merely 5 battalions but its members had not only received physical and military training, but also acquired leadership skills that would subsequently enable them to take up command positions in Israel's army. 1944 Lord Moyne assassination. In 1944, after the assassination of Lord Moyne, by members of the Lehi, the Haganah worked with the British to kidnap, interrogate, and in some cases, deport Irgun members. This action was called the Saison, or hunting season, and was directed against the Irgun and not the Lehi. Future Jerusalem Mayor Teddy Kollek was later revealed to be a Jewish Agency liaison officer working with the British authorities who had passed on information that led to the arrest of many Irgun activists. Many Jewish youth, who had joined the Haganah in order to defend the Jewish people, were greatly demoralized by operations against their own people. The Irgun, paralyzed by the Saison, were ordered by their commander, Menachem Begin, not to retaliate in an effort to avoid a full-blown civil war. Although many Irgunists objected to these orders, they obeyed Begin and refrained from fighting back. The Saison eventually ended due to perceived British betrayal of the Yishuv becoming more obvious to the public and increased opposition from Haganah members. Post-World War II. The Saison officially ended when the Haganah, Irgun and the Lehi formed the Jewish Resistance Movement, in 1945. Within this new framework, the three groups agreed to operate under a joint command. They had different functions, which served to drive the British out of Palestine and create a Jewish state. The Haganah was less active in the Jewish rebellion than the other two groups, but the Palmch did carry out anti-British operations, including a raid on the Atlit detainee camp that released 208 illegal immigrants, the Night of the Trains, the Night of the Bridges, and attacks on Palestine police bases. The Haganah withdrew on July 1, 1946, but remained permanently uncooperative with the British authorities. It continued to organize illegal Jewish immigration as part of the Aliyah Bet program, in which ships carrying illegal immigrants attempted to breach the British blockade of Palestine and land illegal immigrants on the shore, and the PAMJ performed operations against the British to support the illegal immigration program. The PAMJ repeatedly bombed British radar stations being used to track illegal immigrant ships, and sabotaged British ships being used to deport illegal immigrants, as well as 2 British landing and patrol craft. The PAMJ performed a single assassination operation in which a British official who had been judged to be excessively cruel to Jewish prisoners was shot dead. The Haganah also organized the Beer Fair. Following the expulsion of the residents of the Jewish settlement of Beer for illegal weapons possession, thousands of Jewish youth organized by the Haganah marched to the site and rebuilt the settlement. They were expelled by British shortly afterward while showing passive resistance, but after they returned a third time, the British backed off and allowed them to remain. In addition to its operations, the Haganah continued to secretly prepare for a war with the Arabs once the British left by building up its arms and munition stocks. It maintained a secret arms industry, with the most significant facility being an underground bullet factory underneath Ayalon, a kibbutz that had been established specifically to cover it up. British estimates of the Haganah's strength at this time were a paper strength of 75,000 men and women with an effective strength of 30,000. After the British Army, the Haganah was considered the most powerful military force in the Middle East. In July 1947, eager to maintain order with the visit of UNSCOP to Palestine and under heavy pressure from the British authorities to resume collaboration, the Jewish agency reluctantly came into brief conflict with the Irgun and Lehi, and ordered the Haganah to put a stop to the operations of the other 2 groups for the time being. As PAMJ members refused to participate, a unit of about 200 men from regular Haganah units was mobilized, and foiled several operations against the British, including a potentially devastating attack on the British military headquarters at Citrus House in Tel Aviv, in which a Haganah member was killed by an Irgun bomb. The Haganah also joined the search for 2 British sergeants abducted by the Irgun as hostages against the death sentences of 3 Irgun members in what became known as the Sergeants' Affair. The Jewish agency leadership feared the damage this act would do to the Jewish cause, and also believed that holding the hostages would only jeopardize the fates of the 3 condemned Irgun members. The attempts to free the sergeants failed, and following the executions of the 3 Irgun members, the 2 sergeants were killed and hanged in a eucalyptus grove. However, the campaign soon disintegrated into a series of retaliatory abductions and beatings of each other's members by the Haganah and Irgun, and eventually petered out. The campaign was dubbed the Little Season by the Irgun. Reorganization equals. After having gotten the Jews of Palestine and of elsewhere to do everything that they could, personally and financially, to help Yishuv, Ben-Gurion's second greatest achievement was his having successfully transformed Haganah from being a clandestine paramilitary organization into a true army. Ben-Gurion appointed Israel Galilei to the position of head of the High Command Council of Haganah and divided Haganah into 6 infantry brigades, numbered 1 to 6, allotting a precise theater of operation to each one. Yaakov Dori was named Chief of Staff, but it was Yigal Yadin who assumed the responsibility on the ground as Chief of Operations. PAMJ, commanded by Yigal Allon, was divided into 3 elite brigades, numbered 10-12, and constituted the mobile force of Haganah. Ben-Gurion's attempts to retain personal control over the newly formed IDF led later in July to the Generals' Revolt. On November 19, 1947, obligatory conscription was instituted for all men and women aged between 17 and 25. By end of March 21, 000 people had been conscripted. On March 30 the call-up was extended to men and single women aged between 26 to 35. 5 days later a general mobilization order was issued for all men under 40. From November 1947, the Haganah began to change from a territorial militia into a regular army. Few of the units had been well trained by December. By March-April, it fielded still under-equipped battalion and brigades. By April-May, the Haganah was conducting brigade-size offensive. The brigades of the Haganah, which merged into the IDF once this was created on May 26, 1948, the Northern Lebanese Brigade, located in the Galilee, was split on February 22, 1948 into the 1st and 2nd Brigades. The 1st or Golani Brigade was deployed in the Lower Galilee, the 2nd or Carmeli Brigade was deployed in the north and took its name after its commander, Moshe Carmel. The 3rd or Alexandroni Brigade, formed on December 1, 1947 and dismantled in the summer of 1949, the 4th or Kiryati Brigade, formed in 1948 in the Tel Aviv area, the 5th or Javati Brigade, formed in December 1947. During civil war the Javati Brigade was deployed in the central region, and during the conventional war in the south as the 5th Brigade, the 6th or Ezioni or Jerusalem Brigade, headquartered in Netanya. It covered the area from Tel Aviv to Zich Yaakov. To the initial 6 brigades, 3 were added later during the war. The 7th Brigade, in Hebrew Hativat Sheva, formed in 1948, manned mainly with Holocaust survivors and including a number of Makal troops. Almost annihilated at Latron, then reformed in the north. It had tanks and mounted infantry. The 8th Brigade, founded on May 24, 1948 and subordinated to Yitzhak Sadi as the IDF's 1st Armored Brigade, headquartered near Jerusalem. The 9th or Oded Brigade, headquartered in Jerusalem. The Palmch Brigades, which merged into the IDF, the 10th or Harel Brigade, established on April 16, 1948, the 11th or Yivdij Brigade, the 12th or Negev Brigade, established in March 1948. War of Independence . After the British announced they would withdraw from Palestine, and the United Nations approved the partition of Palestine, the 1947-48 civil war in Mandatory Palestine broke out. The Haganah played the leading role in the Yishiv's war with the Palestinian Arabs. Initially, it concentrated on defending Jewish areas from Arab raids, but after the danger of British intervention subsided as the British withdrew, the Haganah went on the offensive and seized more territory. Following the Israeli Declaration of Independence and the start of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War on May 15, 1948, the Haganah, now the Army of the New State, engaged the invading armies of the surrounding Arab states. On May 28, 1948, less than 2 weeks after the creation of the State of Israel on May 15, the Provisional Government created the Israel Defense Forces, merging the Haganah, Irgun, and Lehi, although the other 2 groups continued to operate independently in Jerusalem and abroad for some time after. The reorganization led to several conflicts between Ben-Gurion and the Haganah leadership, including what was known as the Generals' Revolt and the dismantling of the Palmch. Famous members of the Haganah included Yitzhak Rabin, Ariel Sharon, Rehavam Zevi, Dov Hoz, Moshe Dayan, Yigal Allon and Dr. Ruth Westheimer. The Museum of Underground Prisoners in Jerusalem commemorates the activity of the underground groups in the pre-state period, recreating the everyday life of those imprisoned there. Palhub Unit Some Bedouins had long-standing ties with nearby Jewish communities. They helped defend these communities in the 1936–1939 Arab Revolt in Palestine. During the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, some Bedouins of Tuba formed an alliance with the Haganah defending Jewish communities in the Upper Galilee against Syria. Some were part of a Palhub unit of the Haganah. Sheikh Hussein Muhammad Ali Abu Yusuf of Tuba was quoted in 1948 as saying, "Is it not written in the Quran that the ties of neighbors are as dear as those of relations? Our friendship with the Jews goes back many years. We felt we could trust them and they learned from us too." See also, History of Israel. Notes. References, Dov Joseph, The Faithful City The Siege of Jerusalem 1948. Library of Congress No. 60 10976. Ephraim Karsh, The Arab-Israeli Conflict The Palestine War 1948, Osprey Publishing, 2002, ISBN 978-1-84176-372-9, Harry Levin. Jerusalem Embattled, a Diary of the City Under Siege. Castles, 1997. ISBN 0-304-33765-X. Benny Morris, The Birth of the Palestinian Refugee Problem Revisited, Cambridge University Press, 2004, ISBN 978-0-521-00967-6, Elan Papa. Copyright, La Gerda 1948 N. Palestine, Louisiana. Fabrica Copyright Editions, 2000, ISBN 978-2-264-04036-7. Yugen Rogan, Avi Shlomo, La Gerda Palestine 1948, Deria Rila Maith, Autrement, 2002, ISBN 978-2-7467-0240-0. Further reading, Whitman, Aaron. Israel's Wars, A History Since 1947. London, Routledge, 2002. ISBN 978-415-28716-6. Niv, David. The Ergun Tsva Alumi. Jerusalem, World Zionist Organization, 1980. Text of the British White Paper linking Jewish Agency to Zionist terrorism in Palestine, The New York Times, July 25, 1946, pages 8. Zodka, Dr. Saul. Blood in Zion, How the Jewish Guerrillas Drove the British Out of Palestine. London, Brasses, 1995. ISBN 978-1-85753-136-7. Jim G. Tobias, Peter Zink. Nakama Jar 1/4 dish ration nanosecond tar currency turn. Concrete Literature Verlag, Hamburg 2000. 173 Seaton, ISBN 978-3-89458-194-7, Bergman, Ronan. Kolek was British informer. Inet News. March 29, 2007. 1. External links, official Haganah website, the Haganah, from the Jewish Virtual Library, Lexicon of Zionism, Haganah, the Haganah, History of the Israeli Underground Defense Force, by the ZIIC, From Hazoma to the Israel Defense Forces Armed Jewish Defense in Palestine, by Meir Poel.